Madelyn Hoffman. She's the Green candidate for the U.S. Senate in New Jersey, running against Cory Booker. And she's for a Green New Deal. Cory Booker's not. She's for Medicare for all. Cory Booker's not. She's a longtime peace activist. She's for deep cuts in military spending, peace initiatives to get out of these endless wars and deal with this crazy nuclear arms race. And Cory Booker is not. So she's the kind of candidate that Green should support. There she is.
Hello.
And so welcome, Madelyn. Tell us a little more about yourself, and then what you're running on, and people can ask you questions.
Sure, and thank you so much for having me on this Tuesday night live stream. I've watched a number of the episodes, and always learned a lot from listening in, and I'm honored to be asked to be invited to be on the show. Yes, I am running against Senator Cory Booker, and yes, I was a longtime peace activist and still am. Also, for almost 20 years, I was the director of a nonprofit environmental organization called the Grassroots Environmental Organization. And we work directly with citizens groups and communities who were fighting against toxic chemical pollution. So we were not the open space type of environmental group, although we believed in it. We were more directly confronting chemical companies, those who would dump wastes into landfills, those who wanted to build hazardous waste incinerators or garbage incinerators. So I had almost 20 years of working doing that. And I also was Ralph Nader's vice presidential running mate in New Jersey in 1996. So I ran for vice president in New Jersey in 96. I ran against Christy Todd Whitman for governor in 1997. And then I ran for U.S. Congress in 1998. Then I took almost 20 years off, a full 20 years off as a director of the nonprofit peace organization. So in 2018, I ran against Senator Menendez. I ran for U.S. Senate as a Green and got 25,150 votes, third behind the Menendez and Hugan. And so I thought, inspired by that, empowered by that I'd run again in 2020. And this time my opponent is Senator Cory Booker, as you mentioned.
So you mentioned toxics, and we're all focused on climate change right now, but maybe you could just tell people how important that issue is, because it is not being addressed, whether the Democrats or the Republicans have been in power, and particularly in New Jersey with all the refineries and factories and toxic legacy you have. So just tell us how important that issue is.
Yeah, there was a time actually, Howie, that I thought about writing a book, Exit by Exit, on the New Jersey Parkway, because as the director, I was going from community to community, all the way up and down from north to south in New Jersey. We had the nation's highest number of sites that were on the Superfund list, the federal list for the most toxic sites in the country. We had highest cancer rates. We had very high particulate rates. And I don't think that that's changed all that much since 1998, when I stopped working specifically on that issue. So the issue with toxic chemical pollution or particulate pollution is one of health, both for the workers in the plants and for the people who live around the plants or around the landfills. And you're absolutely right, Howie. The Democrats and the Republicans did not really want to go toe-to-toe with the corporations, the large, like the DuPonts of the world or the Monsantos of the world, the pharmaceutical companies of the world that were responsible for the pollution and then responsible for the illness that was being caused both to their workers, community residents. Was very active, very involved in New Jersey with a site that had the nation's highest levels of dioxin right along the Passaic River. The dioxin was a byproduct of manufacturing Agent Orange for the Vietnam War. So all of these issues of war and imperialism and negative impacts, toxic impacts on the environment, they're all interconnected. And you're right. Also, today the focus isn't on these issues, but we take it into the 21st century to greenhouse gases and the impact of burning fossil fuels and the need to ban fracking and stop fracking and sooner as opposed to later. And Democrats certainly aren't interested in doing that. They give it lip service, but aren't doing very much at all.
So why don't you talk about Cory Booker and, sort of the myth and the reality. And I'm curious as to how the anybody but Trump mentality out there is playing in your race, because, in my race, even in a state like New Jersey, where Biden is up by at least 25 points consistently since the spring, there are people that think they got to vote for for Biden to get rid of Trump. They can vote green, and that's an anti-Trump vote. And they don't have to worry about it in New Jersey. But yet, that mentality is out there. And I wonder how that's affecting your race.
Well, the way it's affecting it, Howie, is that I was just ranting about this on my own live stream earlier. Some local publications are calling this a sleepy Senate race because the Republican that's running against Booker is not very strong, not very well known. And then there are three of us independents. So there's a field of five. And we've been asking for debates. We've got a petition going, asking for people to call for debate, because Senator Booker, even during the primaries, he would not debate his strongest challenger, Larry Ham. He would not debate him. He's not planning any debates right now because he feels that he's going to just, walk right in. And while that may be true, that he's got the big money, the Wall Street money, and the name recognition and the political ties to the political machine in New Jersey, while all that may be true, that doesn't take away the responsibility he has to talk to the people and to allow people to see where his opponents stand on a variety of issues. So as mayor of Newark, Senator Booker, then Mayor Booker, left quite a legacy of contaminated water, lead contaminated water that's still an issue today. He took many of the public schools and made them private charter schools, which is another part of the Democratic machine's preferences, the Democratic Party machine's preferences, the Norcrosses of this state. He has a terrible position on Palestine and the Israeli occupation of Palestine. If you may recall that during his race for president, he was asked directly what he would do about the Israeli occupation of Palestine, and he said to the questioner, "Oh, I'm sorry if the Israeli occupation of Palestine is your issue. Go find yourself another candidate." So Senator Booker, and then on policing too, everything he's proposed, the Accountability Act for policing, there are some good, important reforms in it, but as the mayor of Newark, his track record, what happened with police brutality under his watch was pretty poor, and the commissioner of the police in Newark was transferred to Chicago and continued the same legacy there. So we were saying that he's not about to defund the police. As you said, he's not going to defund the military. He's not going to put restraint on the military. In fact, when Donald Trump ripped up the Iran deal, he was relieved, I think. I'm guessing, because as the director of the peace organization, we had to fight like heck to get him to even sign on to the Iran deal in the first place. And so now he says he doesn't think he would enter into any other kind of agreement with Iran, which obviously, if you don't have an agreement, you've got a more aggressive stance. And how is that any different? How is that any different from where the Republicans stand? In my book, it's not any different at all. So, yeah, we are trying as a Green Party, we are trying to inform the public in New Jersey that even if we got 5% of the vote, the way that Democratic Party candidates have won this state in the main has been by 15%, 12%, 15%, 17% of the vote. So even if we were able to pull the 5% that we need for the presidential race, and 5% would be really good for us, it won't affect the outcome of the race. We won't go Republican. People don't need to be afraid to cast their vote for the candidate that truly reflects their values.
Yeah, I think they need to be afraid of Democrats like Cory Booker. I mean, what you just described was neoliberal economics. He was notorious for charter school privatization in Newark. And then his foreign policy is neoconservative.
Yes.
That's the bipartisan consensus on economics and foreign policy. So, with Democrats like that, who needs Republicans? That's the problem. And that's, I think, a message we got to get across to people, particularly in the down ballot races. I understand why Trump is, people rightfully afraid of this guy. But Cory Booker, he could become a Republican tomorrow and it wouldn't really change, or a Republican could replace him and it wouldn't change the votes on the issues before the Senate, where most things pass by unanimous consent.
Especially on war and peace. And, when Juan Guaido came into the State of the Union earlier this year, and both Democrats, Juan Guaido being U.S. appointed president of Venezuela, even though we had no support and we have no right to do that as a country. Remember, people on both sides of the aisle stood up and gave him a standing ovation. So what bothers me, Howie, and you may have experienced this too. Well, I know you've experienced this too across the country. There was a candidate in New Jersey who was running in the primaries, very strong. I mentioned his name before, Larry Ham. My platform is as strong as Larry's, if not stronger in some ways, because I call for an eco-socialist Green New Deal. I call for a lot of the changes you were talking about for workers and the like. And I'm not in favor of I don't believe the capitalist system is going to answer all these questions. What gets to me is that the same organizations that endorsed him in the Democratic primary won't even consider an endorsement of me in the Senate race. So you've got these organizations that supposedly believe in a democratic socialism or a socialism who aren't willing to endorse a Green in this race because they're not really democratic socialist organizations. I mean, if they were in favor of Bernie Sanders, they should embrace my platform and then some, because I go further than Bernie Sanders. But there's this whole curtain or something, wall in between these organizations and anybody that doesn't have a D in front of their name. And that's the dynamic that's a dynamic that has to change, because as you added and as I said, what's the difference? What's the difference? And Joe Biden has said he's not going to ban fracking. If he said it once, he said it 100 times. He's not going to endorse Medicare for all. If it comes in front of his desk, he's going to veto it. So I really put the call out to people to analyze and vote based on person and policy, not on political party. And don't be afraid, especially in New Jersey, to break out of that box, that Democratic Party box, and vote for somebody or endorse somebody who's really working to address the needs of all the people, not just the rich, not just the elite, not just Wall Street, not the corporations, the private companies. And you know what I'm talking about, Howie. You've come across it a lot too.
Yeah, no, the guy you mentioned, Larry Hamm, I've known him since the student anti-apartheid movement back in the 70s. He was a student at Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Dartmouth. We had a whole coalition. And after 10 years, we finally got sanctions against South Africa. But a lot of people like him decide they want to be players, so they relate to the Democratic Party. And then the groups that support insurgent Democrats are tied to the Democratic Party by funding, because the big donors tend to be pro-Democratic Party billionaires. And the money trickles down and people don't want to bite the hand that feeds them.
Yeah.
And even the ones that call themselves socialists, they're violating the first principle of socialist politics, which is working class political independence. The Democratic Party is the world's second most enthusiastic capitalist party after the Republicans. You know, I mean, what self-respecting socialist would be part of that party? And I think, you know, those people got to look inside, and then look at Bernie Sanders, for example. He ran as a Democrat, and the Democratic leadership closed ranks against him twice. He lost.
Mm-hmm.
When he ran as an independent in Vermont, he won. He won the mayorship of Burlington, Congress, Senate, many elections.
That's
The lesson
true.
I'm taking away is, if you're a socialist, you need to run as an independent and go directly to the people. And look at Bernie and, you know, what he's done since he endorsed Biden. He said, I will accept Medicare for all above 55, which leaves the whole mess of private insurance companies and all the overhead that consumes a third of our healthcare dollar. So Bernie didn't change the Democratic Party, it changed him. And, you know, I can give some other examples, but I think one thing we can do in this campaign is find the people that get it, that, you know, we need our own party. And I'm hopeful. I expect Biden to win. The polls have been consistent since the spring. The bigger problem is not where he's going to get the votes, whether they'll be counted, because the Republicans have all kinds of tricks up their sleeves. We've already seen voter intimidation. But assuming a Biden administration, he's going to disappoint progressives. And that'll be when we need to be ready to bring them in and continue this fight. So,
Well, and just to add a little bit to that, you know, we hear all the time the people saying that, well, you know, we'll vote Biden in and then we'll move him to the left. Or I suppose they might say the same thing about Cory Booker. We'll vote him in and then move him to the left. But the Green Party, the Socialist Party, the Green and Socialist unity that we have, we don't have to be moved anywhere. We've been standing right there. We've been standing in that place for many years. You look at your track record, you look at my track record, you know, as an activist for the better part of the last 40 years. I have a consistent point of view on all these issues. And if you want somebody to represent that, then I'm the candidate you need to vote for. You check out my website, which you can see there, HoffmanForSenate.com. You can donate to the campaign by HoffmanForSenate.com/donate or HoffmanForSenate.com/volunteer. We just got our shipment of 750 lawn signs, Howie, and we need to get them out all over New Jersey in a week, because, you know, talking about mail-in voting, we have to start voting right away, and we want to get our advertising out as soon as we can. So we need to blanket the state with the signs and just, you know, our message, because it is a consistent message. At this women's speak out event we had on Sunday, Jill Stein mentioned a Hill survey that just went out last week that showed, despite all the publicity to the contrary, despite all the anti-Trump rhetoric, still 60% of those polled believe we need a third party, believe we need to go in a different direction. So if we can get our message out directly to the people without filters, just straight to the people, and see, let them know what we stand for. There's no move. We don't need to be moved. We're right where you want us to be. And I think that's really one of the messages we need to get out loudly and strongly.
Yeah, somebody was talking to me about the lesser evil voting and saying, well, you should do it in the safe states. And they said, we need to do like, they said, people made Roosevelt. Roosevelt said, well, make me do it. Mm-hmm. That's when A. Philip Randolph threatened to march on Washington during World War II by black workers who were being discriminated against in the industries that had opened up. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, Biden isn't saying, make me do it.
No.
He's saying, go away. Get off the ballot. Shut up, be quiet. And so I don't think that's a good analogy. When people talk about pressuring the next administration, what leverage do we have? The workers can stop work. I saw a call today from Harvey Wasserman, who you probably know, anti-nuclear writer, activist. And I forget his co-author, but they said, is it time for a general strike to stop the next Supreme Court appointment by Trump? I have to get people out if they're concerned enough, but that's the kind of thing. It was not a general strike, but a mass march by black workers on Washington by A. Philip Randolph. FDR had to listen to that.
Yes.
And that's what we need. We need that kind of movement. And then also we need an alternative on the ballot. So Democrats don't think they got us in their hip pocket and they keep moving to the right.
I mean, I hope that backfires. I hope that people who were hanging on to the Democratic Party with some degree of hope will see that, that their actions to knock the alternative parties off the ballot just go too far. They're not democratic. They're not what this country needs. And, again, I agree with you there, Howie, that mass movement, people in the streets, of course, we've been dealing with COVID this whole time, so it's put a little damper on that. But people still, look at how many people came out for Black Lives Matter events after the murder of George Floyd. I mean, despite the pandemic, people were out in the streets. We need to keep that going, and we need to keep that going in a way that threatens the stability of the power structure, that does make them stand up and take notice or not. I mean, I think what we need to do should be independent of that as well. Just continue to push, continue to speak out, continue to be in the streets. It's starting. If mass evictions take place, people need to be out in the streets. We have mutual aid groups who have started to make sure that communities can be strong because they have food, they've got what they need, because each people are looking out for one another. And I do not see November 3rd as the end of anything. It's just another place for us to show where our strength is, despite all the efforts to push us aside.
In terms of the response you're getting, I'm finding young people. I was at this march for climate justice through racial justice in New York City on Sunday. And by the way, I want to brag for the Bronx Greens. They got the best green T-shirt in the country. We had a little fundraiser, socially distanced backyard fundraiser up in the Bronx on Saturday night. And I found, I marched with Peter Cameo, Ralph Nader's running mate, during that march in 2004 that United for Peace and Justice had. And we got heckled by people that said, what are you doing here? Mm. You gotta support Kerry, and you're running Nader. And We said, we're here to march against the war. Let's all march against. They said, no, we're here to beat Bush. That's all this is about. We were echoed. And I was expecting maybe I'd get some of that at this march on Sunday, but there were some more older people that were like, oh, we got to vote for Biden. But they were polite and we had a nice discussion. And the young people were like, yeah, we're voting green. We don't have time to mess around. And in fact, we weren't, it was a thing organized by climate justice people and Black Lives Matter people and indigenous people.
Oh, yes.
And so we weren't on the speakers thing, but, as we were there, they asked us to march right behind the indigenous who led it on the way back. We marched from Columbus Circle down to near Times Square police headquarters or police precinct station, and then back up. They asked us to, get to the front because they were happy we were there. And these were the young people. So I think a lot of young people that's the future. That's the future of the Green Party. And so that was encouraging.
Yeah, we are getting we have a very similar response here in New Jersey. My outreach coordinator just graduated high school and is in his first year of college. He and others established a Yes Caucus in New Jersey, Young Eco-Socialists. They have over 50 members spread throughout the state. These young folks are 35 years of age and younger. They don't have any party loyalty the way their parents might have. They're not connected to the Democrats and Republicans that way. They see both political parties as failing, and they are really, some of them are very revolutionary. Some of the members of the youth environment, so the young eco-socialists, and see all issues
Well, great. There was one other question that was in the stream for you, Madelyn, and that was based on, and I'm having trouble pulling it up, but it was based on, as a Green in the U.S. Senate, how would you be able to move initiatives in the Senate? And if you were elected, you would probably be one of very few Greens in the Senate, present. So what do you think about that?
That's an excellent question, one that I have thought about a lot. And what I would have to do, or want to do, just as I've done throughout my campaign, I would ask for the people who are working on the ground to make changes, to be out there and more vocal. I'd call on them to make statements, to be more out in front. I'm working with the group that wants to shut down ICE, and especially in light of, the forced hysterectomies that took place. We know if you work with people who were detained in the ICE detention centers, and that's an issue that comes up, those voices would be brought into the Senate by me. I also think that the Senate needs Greens because when we get, it's hard for me to even say the words, but there are a couple of progressive Democrats in the House and Senate right now. And all they have are people on the right pulling them further to the right. If they come out, take a strong stance on Israeli occupation of Palestine, for example, or ICE or something else, or money in politics, or ranked choice voting, people on the right pull them. I think the Greens need to start to build that presence so that we can pull people to the left. And the way we do that, obviously, not necessarily obviously, but to me, the way we do it is by bringing the voices of the people who are already organizing, against homelessness, to shut down ICE, to cut the military budget, to stop the wars. Those are the voices that need to be heard in Congress, and I would be the vehicle for that.